The clatter of cutlery and the murmur of conversations faded into background noise as Sophia pushed her barely touched pasta around her plate. Something was off. The usual easy banter we shared had been replaced by a strained silence, punctuated by her heavy sighs and the clinking of her fork against the ceramic. This wasn't how our Friday night dinners usually went. "Ethan," she finally began, her voice tight, "we need to talk." Here it comes, I thought, bracing myself. The air thickened with a tension I'd been feeling brewing for weeks. "It's just, I need more," she continued, her eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond my shoulder. "More romance, more passion, more sparkle." I suppressed a sigh. "Sophia, we've been over this. I work hard, I pay the bills, I'm there for you when you need me. Isn't that what matters?" "It's not enough," she said, her voice rising with a hint of frustration. "I need grand gestures, Ethan. Surprise weekends away, flowers delivered to my work, whispered sweet nothings in my ear. You just don't get it." A wave of weariness washed over me. I'd tried, hadn't I? The occasional bouquet, the carefully chosen birthday gifts, the quiet evenings in with her favorite takeout. But it was never enough. Sophia, it seemed, had been swept up in a whirlwind of rom-com fantasies and Instagram-worthy expectations. "Who is he?" I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. She flinched, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. "His name is Derek," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "He makes me feel seen. He understands what I need." Derek. The flashy guy from her office. The one with the sports car and the endless supply of cheesy pickup lines. The one who probably spent his rent money on champagne and roses. "So that's it then?" I asked, a hollow ache settling in my chest. She nodded, avoiding my gaze. "I'm sorry, Ethan. You're a good man, but I wasn't Derek. I wasn't a whirlwind of grand gestures and empty promises. I was stability. I was dependability. I was the quiet comfort of a love that ran deeper than fleeting displays of affection. And apparently, in Sophia's world, that wasn't enough." "Don't apologize," I said, pushing my chair back. "You deserve to be with someone who makes you happy, even if that someone is a walking cliché with a credit card balance that would make a banker weep." A flicker of annoyance crossed her face, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to plead. I wasn't going to try to convince her to stay with a man who clearly didn't meet her lofty expectations. As I walked out of the restaurant, a strange mix of emotions swirled within me. Sadness, yes, for the end of a relationship I had genuinely cherished. Anger, certainly, at the superficiality of her reasons, the shallowness of her desires. But beneath it all, a growing sense of relief. Relief at being freed from the burden of trying to live up to an impossible ideal. Relief at the opportunity to rediscover myself, to build a life that was truly my own. Sophia might be chasing her fairy tale romance, but I was stepping into a reality that was far more fulfilling. The sound of Sophia's laughter echoing through the hallway, punctuated by the clatter of boxes and Derek's overly enthusiastic, "Let me get that, babe," was my cue to make my exit. No lingering goodbyes, no dramatic farewells. Just a clean break. A swift and efficient extraction from a life that was no longer mine. I surveyed the apartment, my gaze sweeping over the familiar furniture, the shared photos on the walls, the lingering scent of Sophia's perfume that clung to the curtains. A pang of nostalgia, quickly suppressed. Sentimentality had no place in this equation. This was a logistical operation, a strategic retreat from a battlefield where I had already been declared the loser. I packed my belongings with a methodical precision, dividing our shared possessions with an almost clinical detachment. His and hers towels, neatly folded and placed in separate boxes. The framed photo of us on our first vacation, carefully wrapped and placed in my keep pile. The expensive espresso machine she'd insisted on buying despite my protests about the cost, now destined for her new fairy tale life with Prince Charming. "Ethan, are you sure you don't want this?" Sophia asked, gesturing towards a set of matching mugs, her voice tinged with a hesitant awkwardness. You keep them, I replied, my voice carefully neutral. I'm sure Derek will appreciate a good cup of coffee in the morning. A flicker of something crossed her face. Regret? Uncertainty? I couldn't tell, and frankly, I didn't care. My focus was on the task at hand, on completing the disengagement with minimal emotional fallout. The new apartment was smaller, decidedly less glamorous, and significantly more affordable. But it was mine. My space, my rules, my sanctuary. As I unpacked the boxes, a sense of liberation washed over me. No more compromising on decor. No more tiptoeing around someone else's schedule. No more trying to meet expectations I could never fulfill. This was a fresh start. A chance to build a life that was truly my own. The first few days were strange. The silence was deafening, the absence of Sophia's presence a constant reminder of what I had lost. I fumbled with the unfamiliar kitchen appliances, burned my first attempt at cooking a decent meal, and spent an embarrassing amount of time trying to figure out how to work the washing machine. But with each small victory, with each conquered domestic challenge, a sense of accomplishment grew. I was learning, adapting, thriving in my newfound independence. The nights were the hardest. The quiet solitude of my apartment, once a welcome respite from the demands of work and relationships, now felt empty and isolating. I missed Sophia's laughter, her warmth, the comforting rhythm of our shared routine. But I also recognized the opportunity that this newfound freedom presented. An opportunity to explore my own interests, to pursue my own goals, to rediscover the man I had been before the demands of a relationship had consumed me. I started going to the gym, the physical exertion a welcome distraction from the mental turmoil. I enrolled in an evening class, rediscovering a long-forgotten passion for photography. I reconnected with old friends, explored new hobbies, and slowly, tentatively, began to build a life that was richer, more fulfilling, and infinitely more authentic than the one I had left behind. Sophia might be living her fairy tale, but I was creating my own reality. And it was a reality that was far more satisfying. Sophia's social media feed became a highlight reel of extravagant dates and over-the-top gestures. One week it was a private box at the opera, the next, a weekend getaway to some exotic island I couldn't even pronounce. Diamond earrings, designer handbags, bouquets that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Derek was pulling out all the stops, showering her with the kind of sparkle she'd always craved. And Sophia? She was lapping it up. Her posts were filled with gushing captions about being treated like a queen and finding the love of her life. Her friends, naturally, were eating it up, their comments a chorus of "You deserve it, girl," and "He's a keeper." I'll admit, there were moments when a twinge of envy pricked at me. Seeing her radiant smile, the carefree joy in her eyes, it was hard not to feel a pang of longing for what we once had. But then I'd scroll through Derek's own feed, a carefully curated collection of selfies with rented sports cars and borrowed yachts. And the envy would quickly dissipate. It was all smoke and mirrors, a carefully constructed facade designed to impress and seduce. And Sophia, blinded by the glitter, was falling for it hook, line, and sinker. Meanwhile, my life was taking a decidedly different turn. I channeled my energy into my work, taking on new challenges, putting in the extra hours, and proving my worth. My boss, a no-nonsense woman who valued results over charm, seemed to appreciate my dedication. "Hayes," she'd said during our last meeting, "you've really stepped up your game these past few weeks. Keep this up and we'll have to have a serious conversation about your future with the company." A promotion. A real, tangible reward for hard work and dedication, not for empty promises and borrowed bling. It was a validation of my values, a confirmation that my practical approach to life wasn't so boring after all. And then there was the gym. It started as a way to burn off the frustration, a physical outlet for the emotional turmoil. But it quickly became something more. The sweat, the strain, the feeling of my muscles pushing their limits, it was empowering. I was sculpting not just my body, but my self-worth. The man staring back at me in the mirror wasn't just leaner and stronger. He was more confident, more self-assured, more me. "Dude, you're looking ripped," Mark, my colleague, exclaimed one day, catching me flexing in the office bathroom mirror. "What's your secret?" "Just hitting the gym, eating right," I replied, shrugging off the compliment. But the truth was, it was more than that. It was about taking control, about investing in myself, about proving that I didn't need Sophia or Derek or anyone else to validate my worth. As the weeks turned into months, my life settled into a new rhythm. Work, gym, the occasional photography class, and a growing circle of friends who appreciated me for who I was, not for what I could provide. Sophia's whirlwind romance might be burning bright, but I was building a fire that would last. A fire fueled by self-respect, ambition, and a quiet confidence that Sophia, with all her sparkle, could never truly understand. The overheard conversation wasn't meant for my ears. A hushed exchange between two of Sophia's friends at the coffee shop, where I often went for my morning caffeine fix. But the mention of her name, followed by a string of worried whispers about maxed-out credit cards and dodgy loans, piqued my interest. "He's drowning in debt," one of them hissed, her voice laced with a mixture of concern and schadenfreude. "He's been using Sophia's money to keep up the facade." My blood ran cold. Sophia, with her trusting heart and her penchant for fairy tale endings, was being used. Her love exploited by a man who was nothing more than a charming con artist. A wave of anger washed over me, followed by a strange sense of vindication. Sophia had chosen sparkle over substance, passion over practicality, and now she was paying the price. I pushed the eavesdropping guilt aside and focused on my own life, which, thankfully, was moving in a decidedly upward trajectory. The promotion came through, accompanied by a significant salary increase and a new corner office with a surprisingly decent view. "Congratulations, Ethan," my boss said, her tone surprisingly warm. "You've earned it. I'm expecting great things from you." "Thank you," I replied, trying to maintain a professional demeanor despite the surge of satisfaction that coursed through me. "I won't disappoint you." And I meant it. This promotion wasn't just about the money or the status. It was about proving myself, about demonstrating that my steady, reliable approach to life could lead to success, even in a world obsessed with flash and flamboyance. With my newfound financial security, I started exploring new avenues, stepping outside my comfort zone. I joined a hiking club, discovering a love for the outdoors I never knew I had. I signed up for a wine-tasting course, expanding my palate and my social circle. I even attended a salsa dancing class, where I met a woman named Olivia, a vibrant and intelligent architect with a refreshingly down-to-earth perspective on life. "So you're a numbers guy, huh?" she'd said with a playful smile as we stumbled through a particularly complicated dance step. "That's different." "Different can be good," I'd replied, surprised by my own boldness. "It's all about balance, right? You need the structure to support the creativity." She'd laughed, a genuine melodic sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "I like the way you think," she'd said, her eyes sparkling with an interest that was both flattering and intriguing. As I navigated this new chapter of my life, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of Sophia's situation. She had chased passion and romance, blinded by the glitter and the grand gestures, only to end up with a man who was not only financially irresponsible, but also potentially deceitful. I, on the other hand, had been criticized for my practicality, my lack of sparkle. But it was those very qualities that had grounded me, guided me, and ultimately led me to a place of stability, success, and a newfound appreciation for the simple joys of life. Sophia might be living her fairy tale, but I was building a reality that was far more fulfilling, far more authentic, and infinitely more sustainable. The first sign of trouble was the overdue notice for the electricity bill. A stark white envelope with a glaring red stamp that screamed "past due." Sophia, initially dismissive, tossed it aside with a careless flick of her wrist. "It's just a mix-up," she'd murmured, her voice a little too bright. "Derek will sort it out." But the mix-ups kept happening. The phone calls from collection agencies became more frequent, the letters demanding payment piled up on the counter, and the once carefree atmosphere of their apartment was replaced by a gnawing anxiety that Sophia couldn't ignore. Derek, we need to talk about these bills, she said one evening, her voice laced with a tension she could no longer conceal. Derek, sprawled on the sofa with a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand, waved a dismissive hand. Don't worry about it, babe. It's just a temporary cash flow issue. I've got a few deals in the pipeline that will clear everything up. Sophia, however, wasn't convinced. She'd heard those promises before, the vague assurances of future riches that never seemed to materialize. The doubts that had been simmering beneath the surface began to boil over. Deals? What deals? She pressed, her voice rising with frustration. You've been saying that for months, and nothing has changed. We're drowning in debt, Derek. He sat up, his face darkening with annoyance. Don't you trust me, Sophia? I told you I'd take care of everything. Just relax and enjoy the ride. But the ride was starting to feel a lot less enjoyable. The extravagant dinners, the designer clothes, the weekend getaways, they all felt tainted now, a constant reminder of the precarious financial tightrope they were walking. Enjoy the ride? She scoffed, her voice laced with bitterness. While we're facing eviction? While our credit cards are maxed out? While debt collectors are hounding us day and night? Their arguments became more frequent, more heated, the romantic facade cracking under the weight of their financial woes. Derek, once the charming prince, now revealed his true colors, a petulant man-child who shied away from responsibility, preferring to bury his head in the sand rather than face the consequences of his actions. Sophia, trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, started to yearn for the stability she had so carelessly discarded. Ethan, with his sensible budgeting and his steady income, suddenly seemed a lot more appealing than the charismatic charmer who had swept her off her feet. He always paid the bills on time, she thought, a pang of regret twisting in her gut. He always made sure we had a roof over our heads and food on the table. He never made promises he couldn't keep. The doubts grew, gnawing at her conscience, whispering insidious truths she could no longer ignore. Derek, with his flashy lifestyle and his empty promises, was a mirage, a shimmering illusion that was fading fast. And Sophia, blinded by the sparkle, was starting to realize that she had traded security and stability for a fleeting fantasy, a romance built on a foundation of lies and debt. Derek's sure-thing investments turned out to be anything but. The cryptocurrency he'd sunk their savings into plummeted, the insider tip on the stock market proved to be disastrously wrong, and the get-rich-quick scheme he'd concocted with his equally dubious buddies backfired spectacularly. Each loss was met with a fresh wave of denial, a desperate scramble to recoup the money, followed by an even deeper plunge into the financial abyss. The charming facade that had once captivated Sophia began to crumble, revealing the petulant, irresponsible man-child beneath. The sweet-nothings were replaced by irritable snaps, the romantic gestures by sullen withdrawals. Derek, once the life of the party, now retreated to the couch, his eyes glued to the financial news channels, his face a mask of anxiety and frustration. Sophia, trapped in this downward spiral, felt a growing sense of disillusionment and despair. The fairy tale romance she'd envisioned had devolved into a nightmare of debt and deception. The social gatherings she once relished now filled her with dread, the forced smiles and the carefully constructed lies a heavy burden to bear. I can't do this anymore, she confessed to her friend Chloe one afternoon, her voice trembling with suppressed tears. He's not who I thought he was. He's a mess. Chloe, always the pragmatic one, offered a sympathetic ear, but also a dose of harsh reality. Sophia, you knew he was all about the flash. You chose the sparkle over the substance. Now you're dealing with the consequences. Sophia winced, the truth of Chloe's words stinging like a slap. She had been blinded by the romance, the excitement, the illusion of a life less ordinary. And in her pursuit of passion, she had sacrificed the stability and security that Ethan had offered. I know, she whispered, her voice thick with regret. I was so stupid. I miss Ethan. I miss his normalcy. Even her parents, once supportive of her pursuit of true love, now offered little comfort. Sophia, we warned you about that Derek fellow, her mother said, her voice laced with disappointment. "You should have listened to us. Ethan was a good man." Sophia hung up the phone, the weight of her parents' disapproval adding to her growing burden of guilt and regret. Her self-esteem plummeted, her confidence shattered. She felt foolish, naive, and utterly alone. In the quiet hours of the night, when Derek's snores echoed through their increasingly empty apartment, Sophia's thoughts would drift back to Ethan. She'd remember his quiet strength, his unwavering dependability, the way he always made her feel safe and secure. She'd recall the simple gestures of love, the warm hugs, the thoughtful gifts, the quiet evenings spent together, sharing comfortable silences and easy laughter. Those memories, once dismissed as mundane and unexciting, now shimmered with a nostalgic appeal. Sophia had traded the real for the illusion, the substance for the sparkle. And as her world crumbled around her, she realized the true cost of her mistake. The romance had faded, the passion had died, and all that remained was the bitter taste of regret and the longing for a love she had foolishly thrown away. The final blow came swiftly, a devastating 1-2 punch that shattered the fragile remnants of Sophia's fairy tale. First came the news of Derek's dismissal, a curt phone call from his boss, informing him that his services were no longer required. Then the eviction notice, a stark white paper plastered on their door, a cold reminder of their impending homelessness. Sophia watched in stunned silence as the movers hauled away their belongings. The designer furniture, the state-of-the-art entertainment system, the wardrobe overflowing with clothes she could no longer afford. The apartment, once a symbol of their extravagant lifestyle, now stood bare and empty, a hollow echo of the dreams they had built on a foundation of debt and deception. "This is all your fault," Derek snarled, his face contorted with rage and frustration. "If you hadn't nagged me about the bills, I could have focused on my investments. I could have made us rich." Sophia stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "My fault?" she echoed, her voice trembling with anger. "You're the one who gambled away our savings. You're the one who lied to me about everything." The argument escalated. A torrent of accusations and recriminations, the last vestiges of their love dissolving into a bitter pool of resentment and blame. Sophia, finally seeing Derek for who he truly was, a selfish, irresponsible coward, unleashed the fury she had kept bottled up for so long. "You're pathetic," she spat, her voice laced with disgust. "You're a liar, a cheat, and a freeloader. I should have listened to everyone who warned me about you." Derek, his ego bruised and his pride wounded, lashed out, his words a venomous spray of insults and accusations. Sophia had hit rock bottom. The fairy tale had ended. The prince had turned into a frog, and she was left with nothing but the bitter taste of regret and the crushing weight of her own bad choices. She longed for the stability and security she had once shared with Ethan, the quiet comfort of a love that had valued substance over sparkle. But she knew she didn't deserve it. She had gambled on love and lost. She had chased the illusion, the excitement, the promise of a life less ordinary. And in doing so, she had sacrificed the real, the true, the enduring. Now, she was paying the price, alone and adrift in a world that seemed to have no place for her. As she wandered aimlessly through the city streets, a single question echoed in her mind. Was it too late to go back? Was there any way to undo the damage, to rebuild the bridges she had burned, to reclaim the love she had so carelessly thrown away? The answer, she feared, was a resounding no. But even in the depths of her despair, a flicker of hope remained, a tiny ember that refused to be extinguished. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was still a chance for redemption. The first text message arrived late one night, a hesitant, "Hey, Ethan, it's Sophia." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the delete button. Part of me, the petty, wounded part, wanted to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't seen it, to let her stew in the consequences of her choices. But another part, the part that still remembered the warmth of her laughter, the softness of her touch, couldn't bring myself to do it. Sophia, I replied, keeping it simple, non-committal. The floodgates opened. A torrent of messages followed, each one filled with apologies, regret, and thinly veiled hints of her current predicament. "I'm so sorry for how I treated you," she wrote. "I was foolish, selfish, blind. You were right about everything. I miss you, Ethan," another message read. "I miss your kindness, your stability, you. Things haven't been easy," she confessed, the words heavy with unspoken implications. "I made some bad choices. I'm in a tough spot right now." I read her messages with a mix of satisfaction and pity. Satisfaction that she was finally acknowledging her mistakes, that the rose-tinted glasses had shattered, revealing the harsh reality of the life she had chosen. Pity because, despite everything, I still cared about her, still felt a pang of sympathy for the woman who had broken my heart. My replies were brief, polite, but distant. "I'm glad you're realizing things," I wrote. "I hope you're okay." I offered no comfort, no promises, no invitation to rekindle the past. I had moved on, both emotionally and physically. My new apartment, a spacious loft with exposed brick walls and a rooftop terrace overlooking the city, was a testament to my success. The promotion had brought not just a salary increase, but a sense of accomplishment, a validation of my hard work and dedication. My social life had blossomed, filled with new friends, interesting conversations, and the occasional date with Olivia, whose intelligence and wit were a refreshing change from Sophia's shallow demands. I was happy, content, fulfilled. And Sophia, with all her apologies and regrets, was a ghost from a past I had finally laid to rest. I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. The wounds she had inflicted still stung, the scars a reminder of the pain she had caused. But I also didn't wish her ill. I hoped she would find her way, learn from her mistakes, and build a life that was truly her own, just not with me. The messages continued for a while, each one a little less desperate, a little more resigned. Then they stopped. Silence. A finality that, despite the lingering ache in my heart, brought a sense of closure. Sophia had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. I had moved on, and it was time for her to do the same. The upscale restaurant, with its hushed ambiance and exorbitant prices, was a far cry from the casual diners Sophia and I used to frequent. As I settled into a plush booth with a group of friends, celebrating a successful project launch, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. This was my world now, a world of hard-earned success and well-deserved indulgence. Then I saw them. Sophia, her eyes wide with shock, her face pale beneath a layer of hastily applied makeup. Derek, his once sharp suit now slightly rumpled, his forced smile failing to mask the tension in his jaw. They were seated at a corner table, their strained whispers and furtive glances betraying their discomfort. A surge of satisfaction coursed through me, a primal thrill at witnessing their downfall. The tables had turned. I was no longer the awkward, practical Ethan, the one deemed unworthy of Sophia's affection. I was the successful, confident man, surrounded by friends, enjoying the fruits of my labor, and they were the ones struggling, their carefully constructed facade crumbling around them. "Ethan? Wow, fancy meeting you here," Sophia exclaimed, her voice a little too loud, a little too eager. "Sophia," I acknowledged, my tone polite but distant. "Derek, fancy seeing you both." Derek, ever the showman, clapped me on the shoulder with a forced joviality. "Ethan, my man, how's it going? Heard you're doing big things at work. Good for you." "Things are good," I replied, unable to resist a subtle dig. "Just closed a major deal, celebrating with some friends." I gestured towards my companions, their laughter and easy banter a stark contrast to the strained atmosphere at Sophia and Derek's table. "That's great, man," Derek said, his smile faltering. "We're, celebrating too. Just a little anniversary dinner." Sophia's eyes widened, a panicked look flashing across her face. "Anniversary?" she echoed, her voice laced with disbelief. Derek shot her a warning glance, but the damage was done. The lie, flimsy and transparent, hung in the air, a testament to their desperation. I excused myself, a smirk playing on my lips. As I rejoined my friends, their curious glances following my exchange with Sophia and Derek, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Satisfaction, yes, at seeing their charade exposed. Pity, perhaps, for Sophia, who had clearly made some bad choices. But mostly, indifference. Their drama was no longer mine. I had moved on, and their struggles, their deceptions, their crumbling facade were no longer my concern. I had my own life to live, my own happiness to pursue. And in that moment, as I raised my glass in a toast to success and new beginnings, I realized that I had never felt more free. The moment Derek excused himself with a mumbled, "Be right back, babe," Sophia's carefully constructed composure crumbled. She pushed her chair back, her movements jerky and uncertain, and walked towards me, her eyes filled with a mixture of desperation and regret. "Ethan," she began, her voice trembling, "can we talk?" I nodded, gesturing towards an empty seat at our table. My friends, sensing the tension, discreetly excused themselves, leaving us alone in a bubble of awkward silence. I don't know where to start," she stammered, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. "How about the truth?" I suggested, my voice gentle but firm. She took a deep breath, her eyes welling up with tears. "I made a mistake, Ethan. A huge mistake. Leaving you for Derek, it was the worst decision of my life." The confession, raw and vulnerable, tugged at the edges of my resolve. A flicker of sympathy, unwelcome but undeniable, stirred within me. Sophia, despite her flaws, her superficiality, her misguided pursuit of sparkle, was hurting. And despite everything, a part of me still cared. "I see that," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. "But what's done is done, Sophia. We can't go back." "But I miss you," she pleaded, her voice cracking with emotion. "I miss your kindness, your stability, your everything. Derek, he's not who I thought he was. He's—" She trailed off, unable to articulate the depths of her disillusionment. I listened patiently, my expression impassive. Her words, though laced with genuine regret, also carried a hint of desperation, a plea for a lifeline in a storm of her own making. "I understand," I said, my voice softening, "but I've moved on, Sophia. I'm happy now. I have a good life, a good career, good friends, and a potential girlfriend who appreciates me for who I am, not for what I can provide," I added silently. "But I need you," she whispered, her eyes searching mine with a desperate intensity. I met her gaze, my own eyes reflecting a mix of pity and resolve. "Sophia," I said, my voice firm but gentle, "you need to find your own way now. You need to learn from your mistakes, build your own strength, create your own happiness. I can't be that for you anymore." Her shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her. She nodded slowly, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I had to try." I watched as she walked back to her table, her steps heavy with defeat. Derek, oblivious to the exchange, was scrolling through his phone, his brow furrowed in concentration. The scene, a stark contrast to the carefree image they had once projected, filled me with a mix of emotions. A flicker of sympathy for Sophia, yes, but also a sense of vindication, a confirmation that my own values, my own choices, had led me to a far better place. And beneath it all, a growing sense of indifference. Their drama was no longer mine. I had moved on, and it was time for them to do the same. Derek returned to the table, his face flushed, his eyes darting nervously around the room. The air around him crackled with a frantic energy, a stark contrast to the suave facade he usually projected. He fumbled in his wallet, pulling out a platinum credit card with a flourish that felt decidedly forced. "Here we are, darling," he announced, his voice a little too loud, a little too bright. Ready for the grand finale? The waiter, a young man with a practiced air of polite indifference, swiped the card, his expression unchanging as the machine beeped ominously. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "This card has been declined." Derek's face paled, his bravado crumbling like a poorly constructed sandcastle. "There must be some mistake," he stammered, his voice cracking with a panic he could no longer conceal. "Try it again." The waiter, with a barely perceptible sigh, repeated the process, the result predictably the same. Sophia, her cheeks burning with humiliation, glared at Derek, her eyes blazing with a fury that eclipsed even the shame of the moment. "What is going on?" she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "Explain yourself, Derek." Derek, cornered and exposed, finally dropped the charade. The excuses tumbled out, a pathetic litany of bad investments, unexpected expenses, and vague promises of future riches that even he no longer believed. Sophia listened, her anger hardening into a cold, hard resolve. "You lied to me," she said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. "You used me. You spent my money, lived off my credit, and spun a web of lies to keep me trapped in your pathetic little fantasy." Derek, his ego bruised and his pride shattered, lashed out, his words a desperate attempt to deflect the blame, to salvage some shred of dignity. But Sophia had seen enough. She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor, the sound echoing through the hushed restaurant. "I'm done," she declared, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disgust. "I'm done with your lies, your excuses, your pathetic attempts to charm your way out of this mess. You're not the man I thought you were, Derek. You're nothing but a fraud." She turned and walked away, her head held high, her shoulders squared, leaving Derek to stew in the wreckage of his own making. I watched the scene unfold, a surge of vindication mixed with a pang of sadness for Sophia. She had chased the illusion, the sparkle, the romance, and she had paid the price. But even in her humiliation, her anger, her heartbreak, there was a strength, a resilience that I hadn't seen before. She had made a mistake, a costly one, but she was learning from it. And in that moment, as she walked away from the wreckage of her fairy tale, I knew that she would be okay. As for me, I couldn't help but reflect on the choices I had made, the values I had held on to. Sophia had criticized my practicality, my lack of sparkle, but it was those very qualities that had protected me, guided me, and ultimately led me to a place of stability, success, and a genuine sense of self-worth. The romance, the passion, the grand gestures, they were fleeting, ephemeral, ultimately meaningless in the face of true character, genuine connection, and the quiet comfort of a love that valued substance over sparkle. The scene was almost painful to watch. Derek, red-faced and sputtering, was engaged in a heated whisper yell with the waiter, while Sophia sat frozen, her gaze fixed on some distant point on the wall, her cheeks flushed with shame. Enough was enough. I signaled the waiter, my expression carefully neutral. "I'll take care of their bill," I said, handing him my card, "and add a generous tip for your trouble." The waiter, his eyes widening in surprise, nodded gratefully. I waited until the transaction was complete, the receipt tucked discreetly into my pocket, before turning to Sophia. A slow smile spread across my face, a touch of irony lacing my voice. "Sophia," I said, "you wanted romance? Guess that includes the bill, too." Her head snapped up, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of shock and humiliation. The words, sharp and cutting, were the final blow, a stark reminder of the consequences of her choices, the price of her pursuit of passion over practicality. I saw the realization dawn in her eyes, the understanding that she had traded security and stability for a fleeting illusion, a romance built on a foundation of lies and debt. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked away, my head held high, my shoulders squared, leaving Sophia and Derek to grapple with the wreckage of their own making. The restaurant, with its hushed ambiance and opulent decor, suddenly felt stifling, the air thick with the stench of their shattered dreams. Outside, the cool night air was a welcome relief. I rejoined my friends, their laughter and easy banter a balm to my soul. We walked down the street, our conversation flowing effortlessly, our spirits high. I shared the story of the encounter, the irony of the situation eliciting a chorus of amused groans and knowing nods. "Karma's a bitch, isn't she?" Mark chuckled, raising his glass in a mock toast. "Indeed," I replied, a genuine smile spreading across my face. The bitterness, the resentment, the lingering hurt. It had all faded, replaced by a sense of contentment, a quiet satisfaction at having navigated the storm and emerged stronger, wiser, and infinitely more content with the life I had built. Sophia might be left with the romance receipt, a bitter reminder of the cost of her choices. But I had the real prize, the freedom to define my own happiness, to pursue my own path, to build a future based on values that were far more enduring than the fleeting illusions of passion and sparkle. And in that moment, as I looked ahead to the possibilities that awaited me, I knew that I had truly moved on.